Well, welcome to Sound Advice, a hearing friendly business podcast. It is so great today to have a special guest on the show, Dr. Neil Bauman. He's a hearing loss coping skills specialist. He's a researcher, he's an author, and he's a speaker on issues pertaining to hearing loss. Dr. Neil is no stranger to the problems associated with hearing loss. He has successfully lived with a lifelong severe hereditary hearing loss himself. And this is part of a series that Dr. Neil is going to be on for because March coming up is March the 3rd, actually, is International Hearing Day. So in the world, we currently have 1.1 billion people that have hearing loss. By 2050, it's supposed to be 90 billion. So if you can do something to conserve your hearing, or if you can do something to help your hearing if you currently have it, like we have 2.2 Middle Eastern vets that came back with some type of hearing loss just due to being in the war. So Dr. Neil is over 70. I'm right there with him. So there we are. And we're two people that have successfully navigated through with hearing loss our entire lives. And that in itself makes us experts. So I'm going to ask Dr. Neil if he can maybe explain how maybe the veterans, so take you back to when you were 22 years old, for those veterans that may be listening, or the firemen, or other people that may be around loud noise, what they can do to deal with, and I'm going to probably enunciate it wrong, but here we go, tinnitus. Wrong. Okay. Well, go for it. Correct me.
Tinnitus.
There we go.
Or tinnitus.
Tinnitus. Okay. That's easier for me because I'm American. Okay. So tinnitus.
Okay. We got
that. So Dr. Neil, what do you have to say about this subject? When you were 22, how did you deal with it? Or what do you see that people can deal with it right now?
Well, the thing is, you and I grew up with it. We didn't know anything else. So it wasn't the trauma that a person that had normal hearing, like we'll take young soldiers, or they're in the prime of life, they get their training and then they experience loud noise that damages their hearing. And so they feel cut off. That's the real thing. I always thought of myself as part of the world. I didn't feel cut off from it. I was cut off because I couldn't hear what people were saying, but to me that was normal. But if you've known good hearing, then there's really quite a psychological adjustment because you didn't know what it was like. And so the people that have normal hearing and suddenly lose it, they want to get it back. And so the best thing to do is you go to an audiologist, get your hearing tested, and if it works, get fitted, properly fitted. I emphasize the properly because there's too much that's a little bit shoddy in the way hearing aids are fitted, because it's just sort of done mechanically rather than, I always say there's two parts to fitting hearing aids. One is the science of fitting hearing aids, and one is the art. And if you go to a scientist, they've got algorithms that the computer will just go along and program the hearing aids to what you theoretically need. But if your brain doesn't understand the theoretical average, you won't be happy. And that's where an audiologist or a hearing aid dispenser that has the art down, and they're just an artist, and they know tweak this a little bit and this little bit and so on, and that's just going to make you happy. So you want somebody that's both scientist and artist. Marry them together and you will be the most successful in your hearing aids. If hearing aids don't help you, of course, there's cochlear implants. And I know hundreds and hundreds of people that have cochlear implants. And with one or two exceptions, they all say, if I had it to do over again, I wouldn't have waited as long, and I would do it over in a heartbeat, because they get so much more than they ever got with their hearing aids.
So yeah, it takes the average person medical studies have shown this, it takes the average person 7 years before, when they kind of think they have a hearing loss. It takes them about 7 years before they actually go get them. And I don't know the stats on cochlear implants. But back with that word that I have a hard time enunciating.
Tinnitus.
Okay, there we go.
Tinnitus.
Yeah, we'll have fun with this.
Three syllables.
3 syllables. Okay. So I know I went on this morning to try to phonically enunciate it, because just recently somebody reached out to me from Morocco, Africa, and I used to live there as a child. And it used to be called Port Lyote, but it's now called Kendra. And so they had a great app where you can, and that's one of the things, if somebody has a hearing loss and you are constantly being corrected on a word, then it's okay to Google it. And most of the stuff is on YouTube, so you can actually practice that enunciation, even though Teresa hasn't been a good example for this particular word. But what would those veterans do that might have this, that haven't been living with it for years? It's a new thing. They're 22 years old or they're 25 and they've just come back to the United States. We have all kinds of things in place if they've lost their limbs. We have all kinds of support groups for them if they've lost their, lost something else. But we don't really have anything for the individual who may have a hearing loss issue. I mean, I will be training shortly at the Camp Penn, which is near me, because they've asked me to do that. But I would like to know what you did or what you suggest to those 22-year-old men and women, heroes that have served us, that are now dealing with hearing loss.
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to get comfortable with hearing loss. Think of it, if you lose a limb and you get a prosthesis, it takes a while. And if you lose a leg, do you want to be running around in shorts and letting everybody see your leg? Or are you embarrassed and always want to wear long pants so that nobody knows? That is the difference of how you can help people. And so the same goes for hearing loss and tinnitus, is you've got to get comfortable with it. Now, tinnitus, you have to get used to it, but you've got to realize that you're not dealing with a disease. Tinnitus is not a disease. It's just your auditory system being hyperactive, basically. And so what you want to do is learn how to just calm it down and let things get back to normal. Now, you may or may not get back to normal. So the biggest thing that I tell people is, if you have tinnitus, is you've got to learn to treat it as an unimportant sound, a sound that is not a threat to your well-being. Because when you get tinnitus, you hear something strange and you say, "What's that?" And you might wonder, if you've damaged your ears, what have I done now? And you get all worried about it and you listen for it. And the more you listen for it and think about it and obsess over it and worry about it, the worse it gets. So if you want to effectively deal with your tinnitus, you want to get your emotions under control, and you want to treat your tinnitus as the most unimportant, useless, non-threatening kind of sound that there is. It's just background sound that's safe to ignore. And if you come to that point in your mind, then you've won half the battle.
Good. So what do you do when you're sleeping at nighttime and you hear that buzzing or ringing, and it might not be a double red flag, it's just a green flag? What do you do with that when, at the time when you've got that? How do you, I've heard people say they stay up all night with this ringing, buzzing, dinging. And I've had a couple of people say that they've been close to taking their lives due to that particular issue, because they can't sleep. They're awake 24/7. They can't sleep during the day. They can't sleep at night. So what do you do in your situation?
Well, the thing is, if you could put some background sound on, like a fan running, if you have normal hearing but tinnitus, you could put a fan on. Now, I've never heard fans in my life, so putting a fan on doesn't help me. I put my hand on the fan to see if it's running. I don't just listen. Or I see if somebody's got the hair blowing straight back. Yeah, well, there must be a wind, that idea. But if you put a fan on, or if you have background music, especially a non-repeating kind of sound. So it should be what we would call pseudo-random, because if you want to get deal with your tinnitus so you habituate to it so it no longer bothers you and basically fades away, you want a sound that is meaningless, non-threatening, but never repeating, so that you can actively have your brain, if you had a song you liked and you start singing along with it, well, that embeds it into your mind, but it also embeds the tinnitus that's there as well. Whereas if you're listening to pink noise, you're listening to water sounds like waves lapping on the beach, a waterfall, rainfall, these kind of sounds, or fractal music, which sounds like wind chimes. So it never repeats. You can't start saying, okay, I got the beat of it now, and you start getting into it. You learn to ignore it. And as you learn to ignore it, you basically ignore your tinnitus at the same time. So that's a good thing to help you get to sleep.
I've also heard that you said that it's important to not focus on it. And I know that you've said in the past that if you have somebody that you're a partner that you like, that it's better to concentrate on whatever that person is doing, or being with them, or that kind of thing. But if a person is at work, so when you were 22 and you were working, how did you get that sound to just be somewhere in the background where you didn't focus on it?
Focus on your work. But you see, the real thing was, it always comes back to that. Is your tinnitus a threat to your well-being, or is it a useless background environmental sound? And if you treat it as a useless sound, you just focus on your work and it goes. But if you sit there and worry about it, then you say, I can't concentrate. And a lot of people say they can't. And again, having sound generators in your office, or wearing hearing aids that have a sound program on them that your audiologist can set to white noise or pink noise, or fractal music. Widex hearing aids had fractal music. And so you can get different kinds of sounds.
And have you written a book on this topic?
I've written this book called Take Control of Your Tinnitus. This is the 7th edition. I'm working on what'll be my last edition, I think, the 8th edition. This is called Take Control of Your Tinnitus.
And for those of you who are wondering, that is Dr. Neil when he had hair and 14 size shoes, right there on the cover. So there we go.
Still have the size 14s.
And as most of us know who are over 50, we're still 20. Most of us are still 22 in our minds, so it's okay. We can obviously relate to those of you who are, struggling right now with everything that's going on, because even during our time, we had our own set of issues, both political and health. Yeah, there we go.
But I want you to notice there, that's the subliminal message is relax.
Relax. Okay.
I put my feet up on my desk like that. I do. And I sit there and then look out the window and just enjoy nature that I see out my window. Because we need to relax and just realize tinnitus isn't the worst thing in the world. But if you let it bother you, and I want you to understand that every time I read about tinnitus, write about tinnitus, talk on the phone about tinnitus, give presentations on tinnitus, like right now, all of a sudden I'm aware my tinnitus is quite loud right now. And I don't care. I hope you get that. I don't care. So it's there. Who cares? Yeah. It's no big deal. Get on with your life and have a great life.
Yeah.
In spite of it. And that's what I do. And because I am so hard of hearing, it's very difficult to give me a background sound like pink noise or waves lapping on the beach or the fan and so on. I can't hear them.
So you must do something visual then to distract your brain.
Or I just psychologically, I just focus on what I tell people, focus on the loves of your life.
There we go.
When you're doing that, then you're not thinking about your tinnitus. Now, if I was sitting here and my tinnitus is bothering me because I'm writing about it, I can always get out of my office and go outside and work in the garden. I'm not going to be thinking about my tinnitus if I'm mowing the grass and weeding the garden and so on, or go for a walk around the block. Do whatever you like doing that just takes your mind off it. But it's always remembering tinnitus is not a threat to your well-being. It's just a useless background noise. And it's just like traffic noise if you live in the city. That's a byproduct of living in the city. You don't get bent out of shape. You just go along and learn to ignore it.
Yeah, I've actually been able in certain situations, if I've lived near the freeway or the interstate, I've actually been able to transpose that it's bubbling brooks and a stream going down, because sometimes the noise is just really bad. And I have a friend that lives near a freeway. And so when I'm there, I just think of it as the water going down the bubbling brook. So it's just a matter of, I transpose that, because I'm one of these people, I don't know if it's hearing loss or it's just me, but I try to take anything that's negative, and if I can, put a positive spin on it. So
excellent idea. Let me explain. This year, from time to time, I hear twittering sounds rather than the standard hissy whine that I'm hearing right now. And I always think of it in a positive way, like you do. I think there's a tree there and there's a flock of birds twittering in the tree. And instead of saying, this is horrible tinnitus, I can't live with it, I say, that's pleasant sound. It's just the birds in the trees. And if I am outside and walking down the street and there is trees, how do I know whether it's real or not? I just happen to know if only this ear hears it, it's my tinnitus birds. But that's that positive spin. But you don't really want to love it. It's just you don't want to hate it. You want to remain neutral. It's a nice, pleasant thing. And so if you can do that, go for it. Whatever works for you, because everybody is different. Right. And so what works for me and what works for you might be different or slightly different, but let's put a positive spin on, but we've got to take the negative off at the same time. It's not a threat to your well-being.
Right. So in your book, and can you just read what maybe your table of contents are? So maybe the listeners and the viewers that are listening to this or watching us that are totally new to this, so they may be 50 years old and they've had great hearing their entire lives, they can go, oh, this is something I should purchase or something I should read about, because you and I both have a lot of knowledge on the topic. But most people don't really care about hearing loss until they lose their hearing. And that's just the bottom line. And that's where it is. So what are some of your contents, table of contents?
I've divided it up into several parts, 4 parts. The part 1 is what is tinnitus, so that you understand what it is, because once you know what you're dealing with, it takes away the fear of it. And that way it is no longer a threat. And that is one of the keys. And so it teaches you what tinnitus is and various other kinds of sounds. Talk about neuroplasticity in chapter 3, because tinnitus is a very complex subject, not a very simple one. And then in part 2, we go on to what causes tinnitus and talk about many causes of tinnitus in chapter 4. Chapter 5 deals with loud noise. 6 is hearing loss. Chapter 7 is prescription drugs. Chapter 8 is negative emotions, which is very, very important because that's all tied in with that threat business. Chapter 9 is for somatic tinnitus, that's body tinnitus. Chapter 10 is the various medical conditions that can cause tinnitus. Chapter 11 is inner ear conditions that cause tinnitus. 12 is middle ear conditions. Chapter 13 is certain foods and other substances that can cause tinnitus. And then we go on to part 3, which is what can you do about your tinnitus, things you can do. And chapter 14 gives you an overall guide. It's called Steps to Treating Your Tinnitus. and you may need them all or not. Then we go into progressive tinnitus management. My favorite chapter that I speak on the most is called Take Control of Your Tinnitus. And I liked it so much, I changed the title of the book to match chapter 16. And chapter 17, focus on things other than your tinnitus. And if you didn't know anything else, I would say chapter 16 and 17 will help you deal with your tinnitus more than anything else.
Well, that sounds really good. I didn't know that I know that there's things like Calm, which is a supplement that you can get at the Whole Food stores that has a lot of magnesium in it. I know that there are foods that can help you relax. If you take too much, it helps too much of your body relax, so you don't want to do that. But also, I didn't know there were foods that could cause tinnitus, but we are running a little short on time. But can you give me just 3 foods that cause that?
Spices, for example.
Oh, spices.
Some
What
people
kind of spices?
Just various ones for various people, just a standard. It could be pepper. And another one that was rather interesting is some people are allergic to mold.
Oh.
And if you get mold, I knew one lady that she lives actually down your way. We won't mention any names or anything, but she is very sensitive to mold. And so she can't even eat a can of peaches because they allow a certain percentage of moldy peaches to be put in their food. You know, that's FDA regulation. And she's so sensitive that just the mold in the canned peaches will set off her tinnitus. So it's so very specific to some people. Some people find too much salt causes tinnitus. Other people, who cares? Some people say sugar causes tinnitus. So good, but we've got to just quickly run through the after chapter 17. Then I give some of the treatments that you might be interested in. There's mindfulness. There's treating sensory neural hearing or sensory neural somatosensory tinnitus, the body tinnitus. You treat that quite a bit differently than you do the what we might call the psychological kind of tinnitus. Then I go into the sound therapies. So we've dealt with the psychology of tinnitus. Now, how do you drown it out with sound? Well, you don't drown it out. And we've got tinnitus retraining therapy. There's neuromonics. There's beyond tinnitus therapy. Then I go into natural tinnitus remedies, you know, vitamins and minerals, antioxidants, herbal remedies, and then medical treatments for tinnitus. So there's all these different avenues. And the big thing to know is that I've got probably 20 different kinds of treatments in there. All of them work for somebody, but none of them work for everybody.
Yeah.
And you never know whether it'll work for you. So you try different things. And if it helps you, great, continue on. If it doesn't, just leave it and go on to the next one. But always practice chapter 16 and 17.
Well, Dr. Neil, I so appreciate your being on Sound Advice, a hearing friendly business podcast. You are just a source of knowledge, and I so appreciate your sharing everything with us. And would you like to say a couple of things? The name of your book again, also how people can reach you. And then I also want to thank Hear Communication for sponsoring this show as well.
The title of the book is Take Control of Your Tinnitus. You can get it on Amazon or you can get it from my website. My website is hearinglosshelp.com. 3 words, hearing loss help, all put together. That's HELP, not HELTH, in case your hearing isn't quite right. And you can get it in a printed book, or you can get it in an ebook that you can download immediately and start reading. And if you live overseas, you don't even want to think how expensive these are, because it's a big book. It's got weight to it, and it'll cost you more for the book, more for the shipping than it does for the book. So I recommend getting it. You can put it on your iPhone, your tablet, your computer. You can read it wherever. I have all my books on my iPhone, so that if I'm somewhere and somebody asks me a question, I want to look it up, it's right there.
Right there. Yeah, because that it could even be a gift that, say, the parents could give to their people that are now fighting over in Afghanistan. And I know we had some people during the Biden inauguration that were in Japan, and they were near very large jets. So, and
Helps.
none of them had on anything that I could physically see. And so, as a person who cares about people's hearing, I was thinking, oh my goodness, these young people are going to lose their hearing, or part of it anyway, or maybe even develop other health issues with it. So, thank you very much for being on the show today.